it was really scary at first because I thought, how do you really, the dynamic is so different. As a kid, my mother would tutor me. So she would like sort of be like, oh no, Nuhash, do your homework again. This is not right. So it was kind of the other way around where my mom would write a line of dialogue and I'm like, this is good, mom, but I think I need something like crispier. I think it needs a little more punch. I don't know if this is the right word for it. I think this is too sophisticated a word. I don't think this character would use it. So it was really weird giving my mom feedback.
Horror within itself just allows for a lot of utra behavior in general. There's a lot of liberating aspects within horror. But the horror of horror can also be seen as there's a kind of fatalism at work, right? It does not allow for catharsis. That is the horror of horror, right? You're sort of trapped into it. You see it in some of your stories. There's also in the films that we saw here sort of evocation of ancient urges lurking beneath the so-called modern landscapes. And then there are references to the horrors of modern living because can sort of creators really come up with something more horrible than the world we're living in right now? Thanks, G5, for having me here. And thank you, Anu, for inviting me to be on this panel. I scare very easily. I'm a total scaredy cat. But when I watched your films, I watched them before and I watched them here too. I was riveted, instantly sort of immersed in this world that you've created. It's not just it's the telling that drew me in, the way you sort of, the characters and the worlds you have created and the faces and the spaces and the way you've handled that. I'd like to start by asking you sort of, how do these ideas come to you? And I believe your mother wrote a couple of stories in Dui Shaw. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. First of all, thank you everyone for watching and sticking by. It's really lovely to see such a audience that like kind of, I think the fun of these kinds of films is when the audience reacts and laughs and screams and all that. So it's fun seeing those reactions. For Dui Shaw, my mother, she's a poet. And I realized that poetry and screenwriting have a lot in common with the conciseness of the writing. Like every line in poetry has to be really precise, no more, no less. And I realized it's the same with dialogue. So it was really fun to collaborate with her. Also, my Bengali sometimes isn't great. So when I'm writing certain characters, I felt the need for certain gravitas that my mother could add. So Dui Shaw, the first two episodes you saw, that was the most recent work that I've done. And Moshari, I guess Moshari which we just saw, was my first ever work in the horror genre. So that to me was, I guess, the scariest thing I've ever done because I was so new to it and no one had really done horror in Bangladesh before. So while I was making it with my own money, as this was one of my first short films, and everyone around me was telling me, why are you making horror? Horror is not the kind of thing that, I don't know, goes to festivals or is like kind of regarded as cinema. Sometimes it's kind of categorized as like kind of B movies maybe. I mean, sure, that's changing now with like, I think Sinners just got the most Oscar nominations in history. But at least we have that culture in South Asia, maybe, that, oh, maybe this is a lower art form. And I think that really helped me in a way. Like, I think knowing that what I'm making might have no value or is almost a lesser art, it kind of took the pressure away. I never felt like I was making cinema or I had to make something really great or profound. I was just really trying to have fun. And I was thinking, oh, like, what would be a fun scare? Or like, I was thinking about my childhood, what was really scary about sort of sleeping under a mosquito net, and you kind of imagine lights and shadows outside the net. And you kind of imagine, oh, what if there's a monster outside? And the net kind of felt like safety, but also it felt like suffocating as a kid to sleep under that mosquito net. So I realized maybe that's family. Family both suffocates us and protects us. So yeah, I think a lot of the ideas, I do think that, a lot of people say that, oh, I'm doing social horror, there are themes involved with Moshari or with Dui Shaw. But honestly, it really comes from just thinking of, oh, what do I find interesting or scary or cool? Sometimes it's just really simple. Like I'll see a palm reader and I'm like, okay, what if you use that to tell a story about class and what's going on right now? And yeah, palm reading is kind of creepy and we don't really understand it. So sometimes it's about like tapping into feelings I don't quite understand. And then as you write the story, the theme and the meaning and the characters come out of it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, that's many themes you've touched upon here. I'll quickly get to them before I just ask a short question. How do you collaborate with your own mother?
That's a really good question. it was really scary at first because I thought, how do you really, the dynamic is so different. As a kid, my mother would tutor me. So she would like sort of be like, oh no, Nuhash, do your homework again. This is not right. So it was kind of the other way around where my mom would write a line of dialogue and I'm like, this is good, mom, but I think I need something like crispier. I think it needs a little more punch. I don't know if this is the right word for it. I think this is too sophisticated a word. I don't think this character would use it. So it was really weird giving my mom feedback. But the coolest thing that came out of it was, I think my mom realizing my artistic process. Like when we were done with the script, she's like, "Oh, who are you casting? Oh, how's that going?" And then one day my mom was like, "I think I finally get why you do it. This is really fun. Like we wrote the script. Now I'm imagining how it's going to be made. Yeah, I think I get it now." So it was fun, because most of us, we have these like stories of, oh, my family does not understand me as an artist. So it was interesting to kind of break away from that and have my family as part of the creative process. I think it was similar to Moshari. The little girl in Moshari is my own niece. That's my sister's daughter. So again, it was really fun working with family. And I think kind of when you tie family into your work and make them part of the process, you feel a little more understood as an artist because it's such a lonely journey doing all this. The annoying part, though, I would say is like now my mom is like too into filmmaking. She'll read about a film going to Cannes and she'll be like, how come you've never been to Cannes, Nuhash? And it's like, it's 8 a.m., it's breakfast. I'm like, Mom, I think you're too into it. Now she's getting competitive about the film industry the way moms are competitive about grades. And I'm like, okay, you can take it down a notch. But yeah, it's fun.
And since your father is one of the legendary filmmakers of Bangladesh, was there a lot of sort of cinema talk while growing up, at the breakfast table?
Yeah, totally. I think my dad would make me watch all these movies when I was just still a kid. I think recently, one of my best friends, he was talking about Dreamers by Kurosawa, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't seen that. And he was like, what? You're making movies? You've never seen that? Dreamers? You've never seen Kurosawa? And I felt really ashamed. And we were watching it together, and I realized, wait, shit, I saw this when I was like 10 or 11 years old. My dad showed it to me. So I kind of took in all these like great cinema, but when I was too young to understand it. And I think that almost kind of works. I remember like, this was really interesting. I remember watching Stalker with my dad, and I think I was like 13 years old. And he gave me like a little bit of a brief before the film. He was like, look, Nuhash, it's a very long movie. It's Russian, it's Tarkovsky, it's going to be really slow, but I want you to embrace the slowness. Because at some point, you're going to get bored, and then you're going to get hypnotized. The slowness will draw you in, and then you'll see hours after you've seen the film, days after you've seen the film, it'll stay with you. You'll feel like you've never left that world. And I don't know if I could have gotten that lesson in like film school. Like it was such an important way into cinema and to kind of think about pacing. So yeah, it was nice to sort of watch cinema with my family and get into the arts in a really organic way. Yeah.
It's a lovely lesson. You're frequently described as the director who reinvented Bangladeshi horror cinema. I don't know anything about whether was there any kind of Bangladeshi horror scene at all before you? And did you kind of, what were you reinventing, if you were reinventing anything at all?
Yeah, that's that's an interesting question. It's hard to like to contextualize it, I guess. There's been some horror stuff in Bangladesh. I don't think it was maybe the style that I brought to it. I don't know if that's what it is. But also, I think I draw a lot from just South Asian culture and things around me. The music that I use, it's all kind of South Asian instruments and Indian classical instruments. And we have these long conversations with my musicians about what instrument are we going to pervert? Because sometimes it's with Moshari, it was the flute. And the normal flute doesn't sound scary. So we had to do a lot of like audio manipulation on that. So I don't know, horror's been done before, and horror's, there's like Bollywood horror is like a big thing now. There's horror comedy. I just think I approach it from a culturally rooted place, and maybe that's what it is. And I take it seriously. I do think there's like humor in my work, but I really do believe in these stories and I believe in the horror. And I'm not kind of coming from it from a sarcastic place or thinking, oh no, it has to also be a romance. It has to also have action. No, it's like for me, I'm not embarrassed to say these are horror movies. I think a lot of times we try to sort of make horror fancy and be like, oh no, this is actually a love story. This is actually an elevated supernatural thriller. I'm like, no, I'm kind of embracing the horrorness of it all. Maybe that's what factors in. But I think honestly, people were talking about that term, reinventing Bangladeshi horror, especially when Pet Kata Shaw, the first season before Dui Shaw came out, because it started with stories about jinns and petnis and shakchunis and these legends that are not only Bangladeshi, but also just South Asian. They're from here as well. And I saw such a huge response, not only from, the festival journey it had, which was kind of accidental. I never made it for that, but from, people in India. I'd watch reviews for my stuff on YouTube, and I was like, what is that accent? Because I don't recognize that at all. And it was this Kolkata accent. I'm like, oh wow, it's familiar but different. And I thought I was just making it for Bangladeshis. And then I realized there's a whole world out there that's grown up with these stories and has never seen like sort of Bengali horror maybe represented in this particular way, which again, we have a huge, rich history of horror literature. There's a lot of great Bengali horror literature. There's like magical realism, which is again horror leaning. Essentially, magical realism has some roots with horror as well. But I guess for a lot of people I've come across, they're like, I've read these stories or I've heard about these stories as a kid, but I've never seen it visualized in the way that I imagined until now. So I don't know, maybe that's an aspect of it.
What is it about the horror genre that is sort of meaningful to you? That you wish to, that lets you express what you want to express, especially in terms of politics and your social concerns?
Right. I think horror, first of all, I think it's in our blood as South Asians. I think at least as a Bengali, I can say that as when I was a kid, it was my grandmother telling me horror stories, or your cousins get together, you share kind of horror stories. So I do think there is something really familiar in it. And I think it's a great way to talk about the world, to talk about politics or society, but also to not make it too heavy handed. And at the same time, making it very, very heavy handed. You can kind of go really obvious with it. You can really have, like, you can have people do, like in Waqt Prayer Time, the first episode of Dui Shaw we saw, it was like, these five people do a really bad thing. They desecrate a temple, they touch religion, and then they all die from it. It's just it's stupidly simple. But you can get away with sometimes doing the simplest thing, which is someone does a shitty thing and then they die for it. Or like you can go into, or in Moshari, there's like this voiceover going on that's just saying like Europe and America are the real evil and they're the real vampires sucking our blood. And in a lot of other films, it would feel very heavy-handed, but you can kind of get away with saying stuff like that in a horror film, and it doesn't feel forced. And if you don't want the social commentary, if you don't want the politics, you just want to enjoy it for the jump scare, you can do that too. And I like having that layer where, you can have a certain audience not watch it for that. They're just looking for a fun horror movie to watch. And maybe accidentally, hopefully, even if like 0.001% of some of that politics, some of that thematic stuff seeps in, maybe the world is better off for it.
So horror within itself just allows for a lot of utra behavior in general. There's a lot of liberating aspects within horror. But the horror of horror can also be seen as there's a kind of fatalism at work, right? It does not allow for catharsis. That is the horror of horror, right? You're sort of trapped into it. You see it in some of your stories. There's also in the films that we saw here sort of evocation of ancient urges lurking beneath the so-called modern landscapes. And then there are references to the horrors of modern living, because can sort of creators really come up with something more horrible than the world we're living in right now? So can you tell us a little bit about these specific films? You did sort of touch upon it in your first reply, but just a little bit about each of them.
Sure. So with Dui Shaw, really what I was thinking about with that series was I was writing it, I think, 2 years ago. I was thinking about what is scary to me now, and I realized that what's happening in the real world is way scarier than anything I could make up. And I kind of made a list mentally about what are the things that are scaring me. One of them is religion. The way in which we perceive religion and we use it as a tool for violence and harm. Seeing that grow in South Asia, seeing sort of, again, like that create tensions between Bangladesh and India even, which is why it was really difficult to even shoot that. And like, we had to censor some of that stuff before releasing it, because literally when we were releasing this episode, there was just a lot of stuff in the news about India, Bangladesh, Hindus, Muslims, some of it true, some of it fake, some of it like doctored. And we just thought, oh, maybe is it a really bad time to release this? Is it too triggering? And we had to like sort of get rid of some of the religious stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it, because I don't want to die for like an episode of like streaming whatever thing I made. But yeah, so I was really thinking about if something, if you hear a sound at night right now, what would scare you? Would it be a ghost or would it be people? And I think the answer is people. I think the answer is like someone trying to harm us because of maybe because of a religious thing, maybe because of a political thing. I was thinking about class when I made the second episode, Bhaggo Bhalo. Because again, it's like, I've never like lived in a slum, but like where I live in Dhaka, there's such a kind of a class divide. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, films like Parasite and kind of using those layers to say something through horror. And just this idea of also power, because I think sometimes when we make films about, let's say, the middle class or the lower middle class, we kind of show them as romanticized characters. We kind of, they're poor, but they're simple and they have so much love and all this stuff. But I was like, okay, what if, everyone's allowed to be shitty people? It's about this, lower income guy who's a palm reader, lives in the slum, but he starts craving power. And once you start craving power, you can't stop. And sure, you can say the film is about capitalism, but in the end, I think it goes a step further because he tries to literally cheat death. And I think that's what all, like, the eventual end game of capitalism, I think, is that. That's like kind of what every billionaire is trying to do. What do people do when they gain a lot of power? They put their name on museums. They like name things after them. They want to live on forever. So the idea of immortality started being interesting to me. And yeah, I think that's what capitalism essentially is about. It's about immortality. And again, with Moshari, with Moshari, it's different, I think, because I was so young when I came up with it. I think I was literally a teenager, but just this idea, this like very primal image of something outside a mosquito net stuck with me. And again, this is what I find endlessly fascinating about the genre, because I've traveled to a lot of festivals and countries with these films, and I always get different interpretations. Like with Moshari, there was this Indian review that was talking about Moshari representing sexual harassment. It was two sisters escaping sexual violence, and an older sister who experienced sexual violence who was trying to save a younger sister from experiencing the same thing. It was about trying to break the cycle of trauma. When I was in South Korea, I got questions about, does the vampire represent the West, the white man? Is that what the monster is outside the net? So yeah, it's different everywhere. And I don't really have an answer for it necessarily, but I think when you put a shadow in a film, you imagine what that shadow could be. So sometimes less is more in terms of what you see.
And you're also using everyday objects. Like, I mean, then mosquito net is a sort of ubiquitous thing, right? Yeah. Perhaps it's the sort of episodic format, but you make your mark very quickly in your films. There's no wastage at all. You're right. You're sort of sucked into the story. Could you tell us a little bit about how you set up your how you set up your films, your shot taking process, the conversations you're having with your cinematographers, and the way you're directing your actors? And then I'll ask you just one more question, and then we throw it open to the audience.
Right. I think horror is a very visual medium. So I'm thinking a lot about sort of how to get to a certain point. And with all these films, I know the ending. So it's kind of almost working backwards. Like, what is the image that I need to get to the other image? And horror is a lot like comedy, where you like set up a joke and there's a punchline. And I know now what we do, especially because of social media, is like we share memes or we share jokes. We'll just send it to a WhatsApp group or like a whatever. We'll find something funny and we'll share that reel with someone else. When I was a kid, I remember you used to learn jokes from joke books.
Yeah.
Does anyone remember joke books? There were these joke books that you could get, and you'd have to read the joke and then remember the joke, and then you'd go to
101
school.
joke
Yeah,
books.
101 joke books, and then you'd go to school and you'd tell a friend the joke, and then you hit the punchline, and you realize, oh shit, I missed out the first line where the lady goes to the church and does this thing. Oh shit, I missed that line, so it doesn't work. And then you'd retell someone else, and you remember to include the line because that's the setup for the punchline. So, when you have to learn how to tell a joke, I think it's very similar with horror. Horror and comedy have a lot in that common in that. So it's just like you have to set something up. The character has to. You have to see the character put in the plug in the electric socket because later the pretty girl is gonna sit at that exact same spot. So he thinks he's putting his fingers in her mouth, but really he's putting his fingers in the electric socket. But wait, to do that, we need to see this girl before. So the first scene ends up being when we see her for the first time. So it's kind of just like almost working backwards, like exactly what do we need to set up to get to that point. With Moshari, you'll notice like at first there's like a couple of small things happening, like when they're inside, the big sister takes that horn and she's throwing it away. To throw it away, she walks through this little corridor to throw it into another room where we see a closet where something's moving in the closet. And I think that's like maybe 15, 20 seconds. In those 20 seconds, I'm actually setting up the geography of the whole house. So now you know what the whole house looks like. You know every room. So later, when it's much darker, it's gonna feel scarier. Like, oh, I'm in that same room. I kind of know the space a little bit, but not too much. So, yeah, I think like horror has allowed me to honestly be a better filmmaker because before this, I was making some drama, I was making some comedy, I was making some stuff for TV. I don't think my visuals were as strong, but when you're going to make horror, you need to really think in terms of just pictures, just moving pictures. What picture do I need before this one? What do I need before that one? And what do I need in the middle of it? And it helped me sort of lean away from dialogue and just kind of think about just the very kind of primal essence of filmmaking. So, I don't know if one person can reinvent a genre right now or sort of contribute to the larger like canon of horror, but what I can say confidently is horror has changed my life. So I think horror has given me a lot to think about and learn from. Even if I, maybe tomorrow make something that's not horror, I think there'll be lessons that I learned here.
Is Moshari going to be? Is it? I mean, we read about it that it's going to be made into a feature. What are you working on right now? And are you going to stick to this genre?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm working on a couple of things. There is going to be a feature version of Moshari, hopefully, that I'm working on with Universal Studios. So yeah, that was really exciting when we won South by, and basically Jordan Peele and Riz Ahmed, they came on board the short film, and we're developing the feature right now. And again, it was really exciting to just sort of make a film in Bengali with a Bengali title and just have it sort of reach spaces that I didn't expect it to reach. Other than that, I'm also working on much smaller films as well, because there's stuff that I'm doing on the Hollywood LA side, but I love these sort of my Bangladeshi roots and sort of toying with that. So doing some features in Bangladesh as well. One is a horror, but the other one is actually like kind of a drama, kind of an inspiring drama with like a bit of a thriller edge, maybe. I don't know. I think I'm honestly feeling right now that the world is in such a dark place. I feel like making something a little lighter next, just because like maybe we need a little bit of brightness in the dark. And I've done so much horror. For me, the challenge is like, oh, let's break away from it and see what happens, and maybe that'll inspire me further.
My last question to you is: we live in a place that's really dark. There are terrible things happening right now. There's also saturation of imagery. Attention is absolutely fragmented because of phones and things. How do you then hold the attention of people, and how do you, as a filmmaker, how are you constructing your images in the world we're in right now?
That's a really good question. Honestly, yeah, there's way too much content right now, right? Not even just film and cinema, but everything's content. This too is content for a lot of people. Are they going to watch it? Are they going to not watch it? And I think it's thinking not just as an artist, but also thinking about what is the hook, what is like how am I gripping someone? And I have to think about that. And I think it's important because there's just so much content out there. I need to make sure that there's a really streamlined understanding that I have of my work, so that, okay, let me give you an example. Let's say I'm at a film festival. I'm at South by Southwest with Dui Shaw. So yeah, already at a really good festival. It's made it, but there are people going around that festival deciding what they want to watch, right? So they'll like ask around. They'll be like, "Oh, what's good? What have you seen?" And someone will be like, "Well, I've seen this. There's a horror movie from the perspective of a dog. Oh shit, I want to see that. That sounds really cool." And that's Good Boy, which did really well out of South by. And then when I had Moshari in 2022, like, "Oh, did you make something?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a horror movie from Bangladesh about a mosquito net that a monster can't come inside." Like, "Oh shit, I kind of want to see that." Oh, what did you make this year? Oh, it's kind of about the religious violence in South Asia, but as a slasher movie, kind of like Final Destination. Oh shit, that sounds cool. I want to see that. So again, this essentially is the log line. It's like the one-liner for the film. And I think a lot about, is the one-liner powerful enough? Can I describe my film in one line that can sort of bring people into it? Because I know a lot of artists want to make things just for themselves. For me, I do have a need to be seen. I'm not embarrassed to say that I want to reach more people. It makes me happy to see people watch my stuff. It makes me happy to see an audience show up and to sort of feel the reaction from the audience. So I do crave that. So I think it's important to think about, what are you trying to say, and are you saying it well enough? So like sort of chipping away at your film like it's a sculpture until that initial log line, that idea, that hook you had in your head, it's completely coming through.
Who are the filmmakers you look out for at present?
Who are the filmmakers I look out for? I think I'm a huge David Fincher fan. So that was very, very formative. Jordan Peele and kind of the A24 horror movies, that was a really fun revolution in terms of seeing what horror can be. But also I would say my OG is Sam Raimi, when he did Evil Dead and for very, very little money. And he did obviously Spider-Man and kind of the career that he's had. Those were really inspiring. And another filmmaker that I really kind of look up to is David F. Sandberg, who basically, again, I was a kid in Bangladesh. I always wanted to make it in Hollywood or make movies. And I was wondering, who are people I could follow? I was looking at sort of people to sort of whose careers I could track. And there's this Swedish, I think, filmmaker, David F. Sandberg. He made a short called Lights Out. It's a really famous horror short on YouTube. It's really good. You should check it out. So he made that. It went viral, and it got him an agent in Hollywood. And then he made a Hollywood version of that movie. So I saw his career, and I thought, hey, maybe there's something there. So yeah, sometimes it's like looking at a filmmaker's resume, and then that inspires you. When I was in my 20s, I really wanted to make a Marvel movie, and I was like really obsessed with Marvel movies. I had a huge superhero phase. So I was looking up the Marvel filmmakers. I was looking up Ryan Coogler and Chloe Zhao and all these other filmmakers and Taika Waititi, and I was like, what do they have in common? And I realized they all went to the Sundance Labs. So I was like, that's going to be a goal of mine. I'm going to get into the Sundance Lab. So I wrote a script and I applied to the Sundance Screenwriting Lab, and I was actually the first Bangladeshi to get in. So sometimes it's like the filmmakers are inspiring me, not just with their films, but I'm like looking up their journeys and looking up the steps that they've had. And I'm like, maybe getting to that step could do something similar for my career, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely conversation, and all the best with everything you do.
Thank you so much. That was
And
lovely
hope to see you back here, maybe.
Yeah, we'd love to be back. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.